Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the world, the Cellarcast, episode 173. I'm recording this hoping that my power doesn't go out in the middle of this, because it is coming down hard outside, or it was about 30 minutes ago. We have been in the middle of a dry spell for a while, and only recently are we getting any rainfall at all. Typically, winter is the rainy season around here, and it has been dry, which has not been kind to my to my skin, which is already, my skin is already, like, especially on my face, is pretty vulnerable to getting all flaky and dry and cracked up and stuff, and just like months without rain did not do much to help that. I don't know if the power is going to go out, but sometimes it likes to, and I feel like if it was going to happen at any time, it's going to happen while I'm recording, because we live in a divine comedy and that would be the funniest possible thing to happen. Anyway, we didn't have any questions from last time, so if you have a question, feel free to leave it down in the comments below, and I will answer it next time. Just a lot of people talking about, I don't know, respond to, but no questions. Just people leaving long, thoughtful answers to stuff. In any event, I think that this is the podcast where I'm going to start doing for the clips channel. Okay, I guess to warm up, there is this really funny thing that happens on the clips channel. So I started that because, let me go see if I can get the screenshots from, oh my god, things are going flying. If I can get the screenshots from that. So I have the clips channel for the podcast, and the purpose of that was, I figured, okay, well, the podcast tends to run pretty long. Not everybody wants to sit through all that. Maybe they just want a smaller chunk of that, like a specific topic, and not have to sift through it themselves. Now, the problem is, if you want to call it a problem, is that I talk for a long time. I'm very long-winded. You might have noticed. I can go on and on and on about things. So for me, one segment, like I have 5 things on the docket right now on my notes for topics I want to get to, and I am anticipating this to go like 2 hours, because I have a lot to say. I got opinions are like kittens. I was giving them away. So I'll regularly upload, like, in my opinion, kind of like bite-sized chunks of the podcast, and they're like 20 minutes, and people stumble across this, and a couple interesting things happen. I've talked before about how I dude, I have to pause Discord. All right, now I'm back. Okay. I can focus now. I've talked before about the type of person who I've categorized as clip scum. I've made up a slur for them, which is someone who just kind of clicks on the clips channel and doesn't even listen to the whole thing, or even like half of the video, and for like literally anything, it could be like a 5-minute clip or something, and they won't even listen to half of it, and they leave some erroneous comment. Is that the right word? Erroneous? Something like that. It'll fit in somehow. That is barely responding to anything that I'm saying. They've just made up something that they're now responding to. Another thing that they'll do is this. I find this very funny. Here's a comment that I got recently. Just do a podcast, my boy. What the fuck is this? I don't know, man. Maybe you could have looked at the name of the channel or the phrase Cellarcast clips in the title and figured it out, that maybe it's a clip from a podcast. I don't know. I thought it was self-explanatory. but I guess not. And this has happened so often that I just kind of let it happen. I think it's funny. If I click on something called something clips, I have different expectations for what that video is going to be. Maybe my thumbnails are too good. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe my thumbnails are too good, and people expect some kind of high production value video out of something that's meant to be a pretty low. I had the funniest conversation. In some replies on something on the channel, where, oh my god, it was so good. Somebody basically was like, it was so sweet. It came from such a place. Yeah, here it is. A clips channel with the 17-minute long clips. Already off to a bad start then. So I basically responded, if I cared more, maybe I would cut the clips down into tiny little pieces you can watch one at a time until you've spent 17 minutes. But alas. Someone tops in, person 2. Garbage low effort clips channel with the purpose to garner viewership and navigate them to your main channel doesn't really change the effect it'll have. So I was like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, I'm not a savvy businessman. They type back, sorry, this is person 1 now, the original commenter. Admitting, this is like 2 paragraphs. Admitting it's lazy and that you don't care doesn't really help your image or case. After all, who wants to watch a podcast run by people who don't care about doing their job well? Someone who hopes to be successful in any field should put pride and effort into all aspects, all details of their work, not just the fun or easy parts. If you can't do the details yourself, hire someone to do them for you. But since money's often a scarce resource for small channels, I'm afraid the responsibility lies on you. Do all the work consistently and well, however, and your channel will build to the point you can get someone to do the boring parts. I was like, what are you talking? This is so funny. To me, what's so funny about this is that I do the podcast for fun. I do the clips channel to, I guess, to facilitate the fun, right? I put so much effort. I put so much time and effort and thought into my main channel, and I put weeks of work into every video, and it's so funny to get comments, from people who are like, you have to look, man, you gotta care about what you're doing. It's so like they've got no clue. I don't want to make it sound like I have some kind of big ego, like people should know who I am. I just think it's really funny. I think it's really funny to be doing all of this stuff. I'm working on a video. It's probably gonna be like 40-ish minutes right now, maybe. And like have someone like, okay, later, wait, because this went on. I said like, hey, you seem to care a lot about random strangers' business, so you might have a big heart, but you are unfortunately a huge dork as well. Which, and they said, yeah, I'm a huge dork. I was like, hey, fine, man, if we can both acknowledge that you're getting a little silly. This other dude, person 2, just keeps hammering, you seem to care about what random people say here, which is so funny to me. This happens occasionally. I'll get into these long protracted reply threads with people who get really hung up on something. They get really hung up and they can't let it go. And I'll type some catty, stupid little comment, some kind of reply to them that took me 5 to 10 seconds to come up with. And then they'll just reply back with paragraphs of response. And then they'll be like, well, you seem to care a lot about this. This third guy comes in, someone else just comes in and keeps going on about like, hey, you seem like you have a lot of potential and you really, like, you've lost some passion in the grind. And I was like, this is so funny. This is so funny. And I think eventually they realized that I was being sarcastic. Oh man, I love comments. So I've kind of someone who is so disgusting that they will remain nameless suggested to me that maybe I should add a little title card at the front of the clips just to let people know that they are clips from a larger podcast, and maybe that will help alleviate things. I don't know. Interacting with strangers on the internet is such a treat. If it's on YouTube, at least. If it's on Twitter, the Everything app, then you've got a 50-50 chance of running into unknowingly walking into a clan rally. Hey, you know what's so funny about that? This is like vaguely related gaming news. I didn't even have this on my notes. You might not have heard of the gaming journalist site God is a Geek. But they were founded, I don't know, like how long ago? They've been around for a while. They have a surprising amount of industry cred. They have been, I can't find out when they've been, for several years. It seems like 5, 6, 7+ years at the very least. And they have quite, like, they will appear, and they are a, as the name might suggest, a Christian-focused games journalism outlet. They write from a Christian perspective about various video games, and they have a quite a bit of cachet in the industry to the point where they will get, advanced copies of, they'll get review copies, they'll be included on, on the box promos. You get a cosign from God is a Geek. That's how you know you made it. And they've kind of just been trucking along, as far as I can tell, relatively normally. I'm not sure the complete history of them. But if you go to their website, you will find a very funny sequence of articles. And this is just from a couple days ago. So, first article of the day. A glowing review of Hello Kitty Island Adventure. 80 out of 100. Just lavishing praise on Hello Kitty Island Adventure. The very next article published that day. Our entire editorial staff is quitting to start a new publication because our founder, who isn't even with the company anymore, did a Sieg Heil Hitler salute at an anti-abortion rally in Washington, D.C. yesterday. But maybe the craziest whiplash you could get from one topic to another. Apparently, this fellow, Calvin, Jesus, oh my gosh, I should have, yeah, here it is. Calvin Robinson. He was this, like, was not a priest, then became a priest, an Anglican priest, got kicked out of multiple different far-right churches, and went to more and more extreme ones. He's doing like an ISIS speedrun. And then was at I think this is a British guy. So here's the craziest thing. He's not just Christian. He's not just British. He is specifically half Caribbean. He is half white, half Caribbean. He has to like shave his hair all the time to hide the fact that it clearly grows out in an afro. And he is just hard. He's just hard on far-right Christian nationalism, neo-Nazi Kool-Aid. So he appeared, apparently he's been, before he became a priest, and I think during and afterwards, this is all after he founded God as a Geek, he's appeared on like, I don't know what the channel's called. People kept calling it the UK's version of Fox News. So it's like their right-leaning conservative news channel. People fucking hate this guy, dude. He was at a anti-abortion rally in Washington D.C. I don't even know if he's a U.S. citizen, and he's doing this speech. The clip is crazy. He's doing this speech where he essentially recites the 14 words. 14 words, which is like the white nationalist credo, or creed or credo. Credo's a different thing. And he, at the end of it, he just straight up hits the what they're calling the Elon Musk salute. I don't know if you want to, if it was me, I don't know if I would want that to be called the Elon Musk salute. I don't think Elon has a big problem with it because he's like a Nazi sympathizer, but I don't think I would be that into it. I would want people to not do. That's like when someone fucking that's like when someone massively fucks something up and they're like, oh, he pulled a Tigan. I'm like, oh, I don't want that to be what my legacy. He does the exact same Sig Heil Nazi salute that Musk has faced no repercussions for. However, I believe, following this, Mr. Robinson has been dropped from the Anglican Church. I'm laughing because otherwise I'd be crying. I laugh because I would cry. Oh, the rain's coming down again. I said it just a moment ago, but the way that I cope with reality and news is that I kind of in my perspective, my homemade religious outlook is that the world is a divine comedy, not in like the Dante sense, but in the sense that God is a wonderful comedian. If God exists, they are a wonderful comedian, and everything is either a setup or a punchline for something. I hope to God I'm just in the setup and not the punchline. That would be rough. Anyway, that's I guess is gaming news. We lost God as a geek. Apparently they're making a new website, but this just happened, so it's gonna take a minute. Salute to you guys. Even though the guy has not been involved, he hasn't been in the company for years, but they could not separate themselves from him. It wasn't even like, oh, we disavow it. They just said we don't even want to be attached to you. Anyway, in I guess more fun news, trailer. I'm going to talk about a movie trailer. Isn't that crazy? And it's for a Marvel movie of all things. The Marvel Kino universe is what they're calling it. That's what the kids are calling it today. I am not the kids. The Fantastic Four First Steps. I'm talking about this because I think I don't know if I've established this. I've talked about it, but a little bit back when I was reading them. But I talked about reading them. I am an enjoyer of the Fantastic Four. I like the F4 quite a bit. I read a bunch of the original Stan Lee and Jack Kirby run. I think that stuff is great. It's super fun. I love the characters. I'm just very into them. I like the Fantastic Four a lot. And when Marvel bought out Fox and they said, okay, now we can do Fantastic Four stuff because Fox had the rights to that. One of the things, well, besides the X-Men, the other thing that was kind of I think X-Men was the big one for a lot of people, but on the side was Fantastic Four. And I don't think people were quite as excited about it, but mainly because there's been good X-Men movies. There's been great X-Men movies before. I think that brand is really, it's proven itself in the public consciousness. Fantastic Four hasn't quite, they've never quite gotten it completely right. They've never quite gotten it like a oh, this is a real, this is the one people point to is the Roger Corman film, which never even came out officially. It was leaked, I believe. I'm pretty sure it was just leaked. Something that was created only to keep the rights to the property. So there's nothing that people can really point to as, oh yeah, what if they could make it good like this? There was the Jessica Alba movies, which I think is funny that people call those the Jessica Alba Fantastic Four movies. Because I'm like, who else was in those that I remember? And I think, well, Chris Evans. Chris Evans was in those movies. No one calls it the Chris Evans Fantastic Four. For some reason, it's just always been the Jessica Alba one. I haven't actually seen those. I haven't seen any of the movies. Maybe we should. We should in the lead up to this, because I'd be real curious to see how they choose, how the adaptation changed. Apparently, they just get worse. There was Fant Four Stick from like 2014, 15, which was hilarious. I think that movie's biggest cultural, like lasting cultural impact is Say That Again, which I love. Kat and I quote Say That Again all the time. As anytime the title of something we're watching comes up, we always do Say That Again. So as for the trailer, sorry, it's a teaser. They released 2 different teasers. They released a teaser for a teaser trailer, which I think is a little excessive. But I guess they're kind of building up to this. The Marvel universe, the Marvel adaptations I think it's no secret they've been floundering a little bit. Seems like they don't have a lot of direction. The Fantastic Four provides, number one, it's something that they haven't really touched yet. They haven't been able to touch yet in the main cinematic universe outside of that weird John Krasinski cameo in Doctor Strange 2. And it provides a lot of material to work off of. I think that I'm approaching this with a cautious optimism. There's some things in the trailer that I like. I think the Thing looks pretty good. It's the first really good looking Thing I think we've had since the Roger Corman one's great. Even the Jessica Alba one, like the rubber suit version. I don't know who plays him in that movie. Even that one I think looks kind of okay. He's not quite bulky enough for me. For me, it's like there's a ton of little things I could nitpick, right? About character designs and all that. It apparently takes place in the 60s. They did not give Sue her ridiculous 60s hair, which I think is a bummer. I think the Thing, again, could be a little bulkier, but I think overall he's good. I don't like the fact that he's wearing a shirt. I'm not a big. I think the Thing should be shirtless or just wearing like the trench coat. The trench coat's a great look. Because I don't know. Otherwise, he's just a guy who looks like he has a skin condition. He just looks like a guy who needs to moisturize. You got to get the Thing pecs. I quite like the Marvel Rivals version of the Thing, at least of the concept art that we've seen. Those are good Thing proportions. I understand that he looks a lot like he's straight out of like a Bara BL doujin, but I think that's a good direction for the character. I like in this new trailer, I guess back on topic, I like that they got his eyebrows. That's something that I think the Roger Corman version does that. The eyebrows are it's funny because it's a really key aspect of the character visually, and I think just every other adaptation, live action, has been scared to give him the big exaggerated brow. The brow shows up really early, like starting in issue 3 of the comics, as far as I can recall it. It's pretty early. Like the first issue or two, he still kind of resembles like a Jewish golem, like a mythological, like the mythological creature he's based on essentially. But eventually Kirby kind of starts he starts defining the face a little bit more, and now the shape of his head is pretty iconic. Like I think just about everybody draws him like that. And it's an important part of giving us, because otherwise, like he just has an egg head. Otherwise, he just has an egg head, and it he reminds me of like one of the Goombas from the live action Mario Brothers movie. So I like the brow. I like the general 60s setting. I think that's cool. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to work it in. I've seen tons of speculation that they're going to have, because Galactus shows up in the trailer. There's a couple, I think the villains, that's a different topic, but so Galactus shows up in the trailer. I've seen a lot of people say that there's going to be some kind of, I'm imagining what it's going to be is, yes, there's some kind of universe hopping where they end up in the modern day Marvel universe from their like retro future 60s setting original homeworld. And it's either going to be, Galactus is going to, I'm assuming it's going to be to stop Galactus. It's going to be to like stop Galactus. They got to do something that involves that. And then that's going to set up Galactus coming back for revenge or something in a later big MCU crossover movie thing that they're going to try to scramble together now that Kang is out. There's like one shot for less than a second of an old guy. I'm not sure who that is. It could be Mole Man. It could be Red Ghost. It could be, I don't know, the Puppet Master. I'm not quite sure. Not much indication. There's going to be some kind of planetary threat, like there's a shot with a bunch of meteors raining down. For the moment, people have been nitpicking like, they don't think Pedro Pascal works for Reed Richards. They don't think this or that. I'm kind of reserving judgment until I see the full performance in the full movie. That's generally how I do it. I mean, there's been several cases, I'm sure, where, am I trying to think of can't remember. I remember thinking Chris Pratt was a really dumb choice for Mario, and then I watched the movie and I was like, yeah, he's fine. he's maybe not, I don't know if it's like the best possible interpretation of the character, but he was serviceable to me. He wasn't that bad. I think a lot of other people shared that. So I kind of hold reservations until you see how the whole performance comes through. I'm very curious to see what they're going to be drawing on as inspiration. If it's going to be like a smorgasbord of different eras of the Fantastic Four, or because it's in this kind of 60s retro future thing, if it's going to be going from like the original run, which I am probably the most familiar with, in which case that would be awesome. The best thing about reading old Fantastic Four is finding out that like all the characters, with the exception of the Thing, are like all fucking annoying and shitty in their own way. Everyone is so everyone in like Johnny is an asshole. He's a shitty teenager who's always bullying the Thing for looking like a freak. Like, he's a total dick. Sue, generally I think Sue is okay until there's a story with Namor, and then she gets like insufferable with like, oh my god, fucking 1960s woman writing. And just Reed is genuinely like, he is almost a villain. He is just benevolent enough to not be like a full-on supervillain, but he does the most insanely unethical things I have ever seen. Like, did I even talk about the issue where they shrink down? There's like these aliens who need their help to escape from their home planet because a meteor is going to crash into it. And Reed comes up with they only have 2 spaceships to get off the planet. And Reed comes up with this shrinking gas that will shrink everyone down so small that they will be able to, the whole planet's population is going to fit in the spaceship. And then the other ship is the Fantastic Four are going to use to escape. So he has the shrinking gas, and then the growing gas, the return to normal size gas. They don't get a chance to use the growing gas, and the guy who's carrying it gets like fucking bodied by the meteor before he can get to the ship. They take off, and everyone escapes except for that one guy who was like a weird dictator dude who was trying to keep, he stayed at his normal size, and then he was gonna ditch the growing gas so he could rule all the little people. And as they're flying away, Sue is like, "Oh, Reed, I'm just worried that we weren't able to test the growing gas." And Reed's like, "Haha, Sue, there was no growing gas. I made it up. I just lied about it." Sue's like, "What?" Reed, what? You just shrunk those people down to the size of ants? The whole population? And you just lied about being able to get them back to normal? He doesn't know that the growing gas didn't even make it to the ship. He doesn't know that. And he's like, "Haha, but Sue, in the grand scheme of the universe, aren't we all small?" And it's like, Reed, no? What the fuck? Not to mention the fucking scroll cows. That was crazy. Oh my god. Dude, I love Fantastic Four so much. I have a bit of an opposition. So when I heard that they were making this movie, I had a bit of an opposition to it on principle. Because I feel like a movie is not a great medium to adapt the F4 into. In my mind, I think that the Fantastic Four are best suited to a series. Like to me, the Fantastic Four are a family of scientists who go on a series of these episodic science fiction adventures, and then stuff comes back and all that. The characters show back up, but for the most part, the stories are relatively separated from each other, and I think that they work most strongly. I'll say they work most strongly when they are going on a series of wacky, strange adventures where they go to the moon to fight a communist and stuff like that. And there's like a secret society on the moon. No, there's a ruins of an ancient civilization there, which I don't know if that's ever come up again in Marvel canon. I have no idea. And I think that that's part of the reason that a lot of the movies have sort of struggled, because I don't think they lend themselves very well to like a 90-minute or 2-hour story. I think that they probably work well for short little science fiction adventures, and writers get them and they're like, well, what do you do? How do you make like a movie out of this? Because everyone's gone for the origin story, right? The Fantastic Four's origin story is not that crazy. It's not that interesting. They go to space and get blasted by space waves, and then they come back down, and then they have superpowers. And that's like a couple pages. They get that out of the way in like 3 pages, and then they go fight Mole Man. That's the first Fantastic Four villain. It's Mole Man. Can you believe that? No one ever pulls on Mole Man. And that's like, it's like, okay, well, who do we get to be the villain? Everyone's gone for Dr. Doom. But like Doom is, again, like in the way, Doom didn't really have this big, I don't know. He never has this big, he feels like a guy who's just always around. That's part of the problem, is that like Doom as a character is just like a politician. Like he just has to go back and rule his country after the story's over. It's not like he's just kind of a guy who's always, it's very Saturday morning cartoon-esque in that way. And above all the other all the other villains that they have. I guess they could do Namor. Namor was in that. He was in a movie. I don't remember. He was into something. Was it in the Inhumans? Was there an Inhumans? Wasn't that a show? Or the Eternals? That was the movie, right? Wasn't... I don't know, man. Namor, I know, is in the universe somewhere. I guess you could do Namor. I don't know if they established him. I hope he's like a weird creep like in the comics. He's like a weird pervy creep. Like stalker. Yeah, so I'm not like super excited at the prospect of a Fantastic Four movie in and of itself. It could be good. I'm open to that. But it's not, I think their strong suit towards what the kind of stories that they do really well in. When does it come out? June, July, sometime this summer. Hopefully the my country will still be here around that time. You know what my country will be here for? Because it's like imminent. It's like happening in like a day or two or some few days on. Is Mai Shiranui in Street Fighter 6. So I didn't really talk about her yet, but I don't know why. It just kept slipping my mind. So I want to talk about Mai because I want to talk about visuals in fighting games, and specifically SF6. So something that I want to talk... So something I've noticed. I was thinking about it. And I think the Street Fighter 6 art style has really grown on me. I don't think that I never hated it, but I think it grew on me more than when I first saw it. I kind of respect how odd and lumpy and weird it is while still having it's got these very exaggerated characters, but with very realistic rendering. And it's a interesting contrast that I think sort of, I don't know, it feels like it fits. Now that I've gotten used to it, it feels like it fits in with the Street Fighter universe, which kind of flip-flops between trying to be sort of like the grounded fighting game, but also being ridiculous and crazy. I really like specifically the female character designs in SF6. Now, I think that something that I've never really minded is that in every previous Street Fighter game, I think every woman pretty much is hot. I think like everyone's obviously meant to be very appealing, but the female characters often fall into the category of like their primary appeal is like they're meant to be attractive, like beautiful or sexy or something like that. Not all of them exactly. Maybe not always like primarily that, but that's kind of like, I feel like that that's like a running theme. Not quite as bad as Tekken, where every single female character has the exact same body type. But kind of like in that ballpark. It just, I don't know, it happens in a lot of stuff. Whereas there's all sorts of different weird male characters, you know, who really run the gamut of different types of designs. In 6, I was trying to think about it, and I was like, I think everyone is meant to be appealing in some way, right? They're not everyone is meant to, I don't think there's a single character on the roster who's meant to look like out and out gross or repulsive. But the way in which they handle it has a lot more variety that I think is cool. So there's like obvious examples, like Marisa is like this gigantic muscle-bound woman. She's like slightly less large than Zangief. I think Zangief is kind of the resident biggest character when Abigail doesn't exist. If Abigail was to be in SF6, I would almost want him to be like Marisa sized. I don't know how they would handle a character like, I can't even imagine adapting a character like that into this game. Like that Marisa, maybe closer to Zangief. I don't know, because he's supposed to be so big. But like, yeah, Marisa, that's a very different type of character design for a woman in the series. Manon has this like long, gangly limbs and body shape, and because she's like a gymnast. She's like a gymnast ballerina. These long what does someone call it? Like werewolf claw feet. Lily is like a baby. She looks like an actual baby. I laugh every single time I match against a Lily, because having played both Marisa and Bison, having like their big, imposing, sharp features up against Lily's like tiny little doughy looking smiley face is so funny. It's like hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby. It's the same meme. Even Jury, who is a character who has always she's always been like hot. That's always been a thing that they've tried to push with Jury. Maybe like a little less in SF4, like her introduction, although she was definitely meant to be like a hot, like attractive martial artist. In 5, they went crazy with it, with like the leather outfit and all that. In 6, she's definitely meant to be like sexy. She's like a sexy, crazy girl. That's like sort of her thing. With the feet, with the toe, which they leaned into really hard in 6. But I like how, okay, there's this moment in she's not just like hot, sexy femme fatale, which I think a lot of fighting game women end up falling into, is they end up in being, everyone describes them as like a femme fatale. Jury, there's this moment during her, is there level 3 or her critical art specifically? I don't remember. But during her like critical art level 3 animation, the moment where she picks you back up off the ground and the lighting shifts and she like, and it casts on her face in this way that's specifically meant to make her look, she looks creepy. Like she doesn't look hot. She doesn't look pretty. She looks like creepy. You can see like the folds and the wrinkles in her smile and her face. It's like this leering grin that she's got. It's not there is a concerted effort by the animators to say Jury is supposed to look something other than like sexy here. She's not meant to look pretty. She's meant to look like off-putting and a little unsettling, because she's like a psychopath. She's like a masochist. Because like that, they identify that's part of her what is she supposed to evoke? She's like a masochist. She has like these spikes all over her design and like her collar and stuff. She has like the spider theming. She's this like creeping, crawling masochist character who just enjoys inflicting pain on people. And there's like this moment where you get that in like her big definitive, because a super animation, especially like a level 3, is supposed to be the characters. That's where you show off the character's whole personality. It's just, you don't need to have any specific gameplay purpose. The entire purpose of the level 3 is just to the animation, I mean, is to show off the character's personality or their fighting style, something about that. It's just purely character based. The only character I would say who is, I think, meant to look traditionally beautiful on the cast is Chun-Li. And I think that's always sort of been one of her defining things. She is a graceful, beautiful martial artist. She is kind of a very archetypal, like beautiful, I guess from a Japanese perspective, a beautiful Asian lady. She's not Japanese, she's Chinese, but you know. And I think that her design in 6 is like, her face looks very pretty. She is supposed to look very pretty all the time. And then you have Mai Shiranui. The thing with Mai is that Mai is essentially, Mai's origin is from SNK's kind of looser, sleazier days where they were just ripping off Capcom, or, well, I don't know how much you could consider it ripping off, because, you know, the creator of Street Fighter also made Fatal Fury. But they were pretty, I mean, Ryo, are you kidding me? He's Ryu, but he's orange, and his name is Ryo. Are you kidding me? They were pretty shameless back in the days, you know? They were pulling a Pal World on it. And Mai really strikes me as, I mean, there's developers, oh god. There's a developer interview from way later, and they're not even talking about Mai specifically, but who's that, like, blonde, big titty lady from, like, the KOF Maximum Impact games? I don't remember what her name is. But the artists were talking about her and what the intent for her character was. And they said that she was supposed to be sort of a foil or a contrast to Mai Shiranui, where one was the, they said, like a traditional, like, American image of a super sexy woman. And Mai was the Japanese version of that. Like, that's, I think that it's pretty obvious. She's dressed in this skimpy version of traditional Japanese clothing. She's a kunoichi. She's like a female ninja. She says Nippon Ichi in her super animation. She is very much meant to be like beautiful, sexy Japanese woman, and that's always been part of her character. That's always been a part of like her visual design. It's part of why I don't think they've changed her design until just now, until literally this upcoming Garo game. Mai has been the exact, outside of a couple alternate costumes, her base design has been the same for 20 plus years at this point. 30 years? Maybe 25. I'm not sure what the exact date was. So when you're adapting her for Street Fighter 6, she is, I think I can say she is the only other character who I would say is also meant to just be, I would say where Chun-Li is meant to be very beautiful, Mai is supposed to be just fucking hot. She's just supposed to be really, really crazy hot. And they did an excellent job with that. The fucking, it's crazy. I don't mean to get too Coomer on here, but like, have you fucking seen her win animation? Her win screen? Where she slides into like a sexy reclined pose facing, it looks like a pinup shot. It's crazy. Both of her outfits look really good. Her face is obviously meant to look very like cute and proportionate. I really like her, what do they call them? The game faces, the loading screen faces. I really like her her closed eye, like frown expression. I think it's pretty funny. They did a really good job. Like they made an entire, I don't even know if it's based on any existing art. When you scroll over her in the character select, before you actually select her, she's in like this like casual outfit with like a tank top and like shorts. I'll just sitting on a chair. It's like, it's insane. Again, I don't want to get too Coomer on here, but like, holy fuck, that's just for the character select screen. And then she has a cool animation where she like flips over and does like a ninja. She like, what is it? She like flings there's like a sheet of fabric, and then when it drops, she's done like a ninja quick change. Just like the walk-in animation during the versus screen, everything where she's like bouncing, she's like she's like waltzing around, hiding behind her umbrella. Like everything, every part of her animation is meant to make you, if you don't know who this character is, you were supposed to absolutely fall in love and be ravenously horny for Mai Shiranui. You need to, they were like, you should be falling over every time you see her. And I think that's really interesting because of how much effort was put into accentuating that part of the character compared to anyone else in the game. I think it really sticks out when she is I would say like an outlier in that regard. And you know, you can think any of the other female characters are hot, but there's like, as in terms of the aesthetic representation of them, what's the objective for this character design and how we're depicting them? I don't know. It's made me appreciate Street Fighter 6's art direction because I think that stuff becomes more powerful with contrast. I think that have I mentioned this before? I don't remember if I've talked about this earlier. I kind of feel like in recent years there has been a kind of larger push or a warmer reception to sexy women in video games. I feel like people don't really mind talking about it too much as like YouTube rage bait guys will have you believe. A lot of women I've seen and interacted with online or in person really like that shit. Even if they're not lesbians or bisexual or whatever, even if they're not attracted to women, a lot of them like that shit now. And I feel like it's been more vocal now than it was from when I don't know, like the during like the 2010s. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that there's just contrast now, that there's a variety of different depictions of women that you get. I mean, like Last of Us was a big mainstream thing, right? There's like the Horizon games, and when you have these kind of larger no, Horizon's a mainstream thing. I'm not gonna dog on Horizon just because it had the misfortune of releasing next to Zelda games all the time. But like when you have these other examples, it becomes a lot easier to appreciate a character design that is going primarily for sex appeal. I think it becomes easier to, I don't know. Yeah, it's because people, I think generally, maybe the complaint wasn't about sexy character designs at all. It was just about variety. It was just about levels of representation. Like, it's not a problem. It's not a problem to have that. But if it's the only thing beyond, like, I don't know, however you might feel about feminism or whatever that could relate to, just in like I think in a very like zero thought, no brain sense, it's kind of boring. Like, you get kind of tired of it. I think that, yeah, I think that it's and then of course there will be a number of guys who fucking, man, it's so weird. When you stop interacting with Twitter, you really realize how weird those fucking guys are. Like, when you get just even onto like other social medias that are a little calmer, it is like, man, those guys just never stop thinking about porn. Like, there's this weird, it makes me uncomfortable as well, even as a man. There's this weird misogynistic, I don't know what I'd call it, an attitude, response, reaction, I don't know, where if a man sees a woman that he doesn't find attractive, he's like, she should fucking die. I hate you so much. It's like, whoa, this is weird. And it's like frighteningly common. I don't know if it's actually common. It feels common. It could just be I'm getting a narrow slice. But just the sentiment is so strange. I see women all the time I don't find particularly attractive in like a sexual way. I don't have to throw a fucking hissy fit over it. I'm sure most people see me and they don't find me that attractive. I'm fine. It's fine. They don't have to say anything. No one has to say anything about it. There's this like contingency of guys who just have to hold on. They have to hold on to their dicks. What is it? Was this ever a real thing? I remember seeing a thing forever ago. Let me look this up. Anime about guy who has to keep erection. Was this a real thing? Goodbye to a House. Is that what it's called? Goodbye to a House? Anime. No, not poem. No, don't give me poem. Don't give me sweet poetry about the place you grew up. Give me the thing about the anime. Was this real? I remember there's... Where the fuck is this from? I'm going to look this up. Okay. The anime is called Darling. I'm on Tropedia, which I've never heard of before. It's called Darling. Darling is the story of a hentai mangaka named Jun Kitano, who has just married his assistant, okay, and the love of his life, Miyuki. Their life of married bliss is interrupted, however, by Soyoko Mifuji, the representative of a publishing company who comes to Jun with a huge opportunity, the chance to write and draw the greatest porn manga anthology in the 21st century. However, they only have 30 days to finish, or Soyoko will be forced to become her boss's sex slave. How will they meet this impossible deadline? By using Jun's secret ultimate technique, hyper-erection mode, in which he is able to fuel his writing with the power of his month-long erection. Darling is based on an H game of the same name and is 3 episodes long. Attempted rape, episode 3. Awesome. Jesus Christ. Yeah, all those guys on Twitter are actually this guy. They're Jun Kitano, who has to keep an erection or his wife is going to be sold into sex slavery. What? No, the representative from the publishing company, holy shit, is going to be sold. Dude, this is a fucking terrible character design. This art is horrific. This is like the worst 2000s anime art. Shit. Okay. Anyway, man, that was a weird tangent. We're gonna talk about multiverses now. You might have heard the news. I'm sorry if I was the one who I'm sorry I have to do this segment twice in a row. But gaming it's fucking dead. Multiversus season 5 will be the last season. Fuck! God damn it! So, I'm laughing about it. A few people are laughing about it. I will preface this by saying, I feel bad for the people who had to work on this. I feel bad for the people who really cared about the game. I do. It's a shitty feeling to have a game you love be shuttered, especially when it was because of bad decision making. And that's kind of what I want to turn my attention to, is sort of a quick an early post-mortem. I say early because it feels like A lot of info is going to come out about just what the hell happened behind the scenes with this game. This is going to make for a great What Happened episode. I don't know when that's going to come out. So all I can go off of is the information that has been, that's known, and also the stuff that's been circulated. I'll start with the stuff that's known. So where did Multiversus kind of fumble? I think part of the fumble, or part of an obstacle, was actually in the concept itself. And some people might find that surprising. I don't think that the idea of a Warner Brothers crossover fighting game is actually that appealing, even to like a broad audience. And what I mean by that is, yes, these are a bunch of properties and characters and things that people know, but there's no cohesion between them. And I think for a crossover, for a really strong crossover, there needs to be some level of cohesion if you're going to have that many different things. You can do kind of random shit like Tatsunoko versus Capcom, or even Marvel versus maybe Tatsunoko is even weirder because at least Capcom made Marvel games before that. Tatsunoko versus Capcom, it's like an anime studio that's been around since the 70s, and Capcom. What do they have in common? I don't know. But those are like, at least it's just two properties, right? They look kind of weird next to each other, but it's two properties. You can find a way to get some common ground between them visually and art style-wise, all that, right? Smash Brothers is the go-to example because they're all video game characters. The bulk of them are Nintendo characters. It might be a little funny to see Ridley next to, I don't know, Ice Climbers or something like that. But for the most part, in your mind, at least if you know about Nintendo, these are things that already sort of exist around each other. They're kind of adjacent to each other. What's another one? PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. They are all, video game characters. They're not all quite Sony characters. Big Daddy. But it's not, it's like, okay, yeah, it's wacky, but you can see the idea. I remember when I saw the roster for Multiversus, and a lot of it, like, okay, I went through, so I have a friend who is not online very much at all. And I was talking to her about Multiversus, which she had not heard of. She's a little unplugged, and I love her for that. And I was like, so they got they have Shaggy, they have Tom and Jerry, they have Superman, they have Jake the dog. She's like, okay. They have Garnet and Steven from Steven Universe, and she's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, then they have LeBron James, and she just like started laughing, and she couldn't stop for like 2 minutes because I'm like, and they have Arya Stark from Game of Thrones, and it's like, you look at it, and there's like little islands of cohesion, right? I think back to like Cartoon Network Punch Time Explosion, and I think, man, that was kind of that's something I'd be more interested in, a Cartoon Network based fighting game, or at the very like you could include all the other stuff that they sort of owned by proxy, or maybe stuff that was on Boomerang. You could do the Flintstones. You could make a fairly sensible crossover roster out of all of those characters. And I think people would be like, oh yeah, no, yeah. Here's my litmus test. Here's like in a phrase what I mean. When people will say, I grew up with Nintendo. They mean, I played Mario, I played Zelda, I played Pokemon, I played Metroid, I played Pikmin, I played this or that, right? I played Mario Kart. And then when they see that, and then they see, Sonic, I also played Sonic the Hedgehog and all this. I guess Solid Snake is a little weird, but for the most part, with a couple exceptions, like 90% of the representation there is someone someone who says I grew up with this knows of, or at least like kind of cares about that world, right? That brand and that company. This is a lot about branding. When someone says I grew up with Cartoon Network, they look at especially like at the time that Punch Time Explosion came out, a lot of those characters, someone says I grew up with Nickelodeon or Nicktoons. Maybe not all of them are known because fucking Nickelodeon loves canceling shit all the time. But a lot of them, like, especially to people in like Kat and my, like 20 something age range. Oh, wow. Like this is actually kind of this is a neat roster for a Nicktoons fighting game. When someone says first of all, no one says I grew up with Warner Brothers. If someone says I grew up with Warner Brothers, they're probably talking about Looney Tunes. That's probably it. They're not saying, oh yeah, I grew up with Clockwork Orange. They don't mean that. I hope you see what I mean. I've belabored the point a little bit, but the roster feels very random. I'm looking at this and I'm like, they have the Powerpuff Girls next to Beetlejuice. It looks like a Mugen fighter, which I guess has a bit of an appeal to it. But it didn't feel cohesive. That's my first point. So I don't think it's not like super exciting. It was definitely exciting to a couple people. It was very exciting to Kat, my favorite consumer in the world, who actually does like a lot of these things collectively. But I don't know. It just felt like it was split between too many different smaller things. The pool was too big, if that makes sense. There is a novelty to seeing Bugs Bunny and Batman and Jason from Friday the 13th. You want to fucking talk about looking out of place? But I don't know how you can't get that far on novelty alone, which leads me to the second thing, the actual game itself. So much has been made about the way that the game played before and after the relaunch. I played a little bit of the beta, which was not advertised as a beta. They just kind of decided it was one when they shut it down. I played a bit of the beta when it came out with Kat. And I remember it feeling kind of a little odd. It wasn't terrible. It was a little bit rough. It was a little loose. Loose, very fast. People have noted, just because of a number of ways the way the movement worked and dodging and all that. But not like the worst thing in the world. After the relaunch, I think the relaunch might have been the worst decision that they made. The single one thing that you can point to say, if the relaunch hadn't happened, or more specifically, taking the game offline hadn't happened, I think that they would have been in a much different spot. I don't think that they would be on their last season by now. They wouldn't be sunsetting the game. Gameplay-wise, the relaunch resulted in a massive overhaul of the physics that felt so bad. I remember hopping back in out of curiosity and thinking, did the game always feel like this? I was going into training mode and just jumping and watching the screen to figure out why it felt like that. When you jump in Multiversus, I don't know if they've changed this. When it relaunched, your character would go into it felt like way too long. There was way too much jump startup. It felt like I don't know, like 15 frames practically. Way too much startup on your jump. It felt like your character had their feet glued to the floor and was trying to rip themselves free. And then as soon as they did, you would rocket up to your max height in like a split second. You would just boom, like right up to, and then it was like you hit a ceiling. You would hit like a hard ceiling. It was so strange and unresponsive feeling, coupled with the fact that the game had a 30 frame input buffer. You might be like, well, what's wrong with having a 30 frame input buffer? There's a reason that like most fighting games nowadays use a 3 frame buffer. Because when you have the game holding on to your inputs for 30 frames, it feels like the stuff happening on screen, because you can input stuff so early and the game will perform it at its next possible convenience within the next 30 frames. The game ends up feeling less responsive because it feels like what you're seeing on screen versus what you pressed, the timing is just, it's off. It's the same reason I don't ever quite vibe with the Mortal Kombat dial-a combos, because I feel like as soon as I hit it, I just have to punch it. I don't have to actually time it or like cancel it. It's just like bop, 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 bop. That's always felt really strange to me. Multiversus was like, what if that was everything? What if that was everything? The next part was the actual aerial combat felt really bad to me. Again, I don't know if they changed it, but aerial combat felt really bad when they relaunched. And what I realized was, no matter where you were in your jump arc, as soon as you hit any aerial attack, your momentum would just be slashed. It would drop dramatically. You would just slow down. And this is a platform fighter. The main defining feature, like the big thing that distinguishes these games from traditional 2D and 3D fighters, is the aerial movement. It's that you are jumping around a lot, and the air game is just as important as the ground game, if not more so, right? Very often you are jumping. Jumping is an integral part of the game, and aerial combat is sometimes you're throwing out more aerials than grounded attacks in these games. The jumping and attacking in the air felt so bad. It felt so sluggish. And then another thing, there was no land canceling. They made the very bizarre choice to program all the aerials in such a way where if you were in the middle of performing an aerial attack while in the air and you touched the ground, you would fully complete the animation and the attack before you were able to act again, or even go into your full-on grounded state. It was very weird feeling. It might not sound like the most obvious thing, but once you play Multiversus, and then you play a game with land canceling, aka every other fighting game, 2D or 3D or anything, as soon as you touch the ground, you are essentially canceled into a landing state. A landing, grounded state. Whatever action you were performing in the air is done. And some games like Street Fighter give you a little more recovery if you did an attack in the air that whiffed, and then you land. There's a little more recovery as you land, right? Before you can actually act again. But your state changes. And it's these little things that, again, might not, if you haven't played the game, might not sound that big, but it was so constant to me. I couldn't play more than like a couple games because it was so pervasive to the experience that everything just didn't feel like so many core parts of the experience didn't feel quite right. So many core parts of the combat felt off and weird. I know some people they didn't mind it. Personally, I think a lot of people did, but didn't really have the breadth of experience with these games to really articulate why they felt a certain way. But I think a lot of people felt that the game just felt weird. And what the fuck? Incoming spam call. Okay. Well, if it is important, they will leave me a voicemail. silence that. What else? Okay. So okay, what was I right? So the gameplay I thought felt very wonky. It felt very wonky and not polished. Like, look, I get that you don't have to, if you want to distinguish yourself from Smash Brothers and you want to feel different from Smash Brothers, that's fine. But there are a lot of ideas that Smash had that were good. You know, Smash drew and Smash implemented a lot of ideas from 2D fighting games. This is kind of like, you know, when someone kind of wants to reinvent the wheel, or they're like, yeah, there's this really funny like tweet or something that's like, my cousin or my niece is she's so smart. She said she doesn't read philosophy because she wants to think her own thoughts. And it's like, the reason we have philosophy books is because someone's already done the thinking about the stuff for you. You don't have to do that. You don't have to go through the process. Every lesson that you could learn has already been learned by someone. They've written it. They've written about it. Super Smash Brothers drew on inspiration from existing 2D fighting games. They drew on, like, honestly, probably primarily King of Fighters for a lot of their ideas. But Sakurai was a big 2D fighter fan. They had hammered these things out by the time that he had started working on, like, Smash 64. And then over the course of the Smash series, they ironed out and refined the way that those games should feel. And even then, there are multiple different interpretations of that, from like Melee to Brawl to Smash 4 and Ultimate, even like Project M or Project Plus. There are different interpretations of how Smash should feel. And for some reason, Multiversus, they did their own thing with it, and I don't know why. Okay. This might be a minor point for a lot of people, but I think it could be a little bit more important than you realize. It's important, at least in an anecdotal sense, because this next thing is the reason that I have personally known someone to quit the game. So, Kat, again, the biggest consumer in my life, who I love very much, was really jazzed. She was really excited about Multiversus. She was so excited to play Bugs Bunny and Harley Quinn. And when she played a fair amount of the beta, and then when it came back, something I haven't mentioned is that one of the things that they did in beta was the main purpose. During the shutdown, what they were actually doing was remaking the entire game from the ground up in Unreal Engine 5 as opposed to 4. Now, on top of just being much more cutting edge and much more demanding technologically, it's sort of come out now that there's, more people have been trying to use and develop for Unreal 5, that it has some, like, serious stability issues. They could get hammered out in years to come as Epic, updates it and refines it. It is technically a new engine, but it seems like it has some serious optimization problems. And it literally spec checked my girlfriend out of playing the game. She stopped playing Multiversus, not because of the gameplay, not even because of the monetization, which I'm going to talk about in a second, but because her laptop could not run it. And for a free-to-play competitive game that needs an active, thriving player base, being easier to run is a huge boon to you. Honestly, I'm surprised that Marvel Rivals has done so well because it is pretty demanding. Dude, okay, I was playing Marvel Rivals the other night. I left to go take a shower. I wanted to go take a quick shower, and I just left the game running on the title screen. That's just 2D artwork. Or it was on like the season pass screen, like something in the main menu, not even any 3D models being rendered. I leave. When I come back, I can smell my computer. It has that iron smell in the air, and I was like, what the so I pull up a diagnostic tool, and I just to realize that while I have been gone, taking like a 10 maybe 15 minute away from my computer, that my CPU temperatures were at like 95 plus, not over 100, but like 95 to 100. I was like, what the fuck? They cool down, and mind you, I have like heavy duty fans. I've got like, it's like a 4-fan setup that I've got over my CPU. I don't have the most up to date. It's like a Ryzen 7 or 8, I think. It's not the most up to date one that they've got, but Jesus Christ, man. It cooled down after that, oddly enough. It was cooler in game than just on the title screen. I have no idea what happened. Yeah, that was weird. It was literally cooking my CPU. Anyway, what are they talking about? Right. The optimization issues with the game probably specked some people out of the experience. Here's what I want to... Okay, here's another thing. The monetization. I think that the monetization was... For me, it was a huge turnoff. I remember looking through the game as it released and just feeling like slime coming off of the monitor. It just... Something about it... From the jump, my reaction to even hearing like the rumors of Multiverses was, this feels very corporate and consumerist, and I am not a very consumerist person. So that was a big turnoff. Jumping in and seeing just the level of monetization, the pervasiveness of it, actually putting together in my head what the grind looked like for a lot of this stuff was just crazy. And here's where I want to get into some unconfirmed stuff. There was a master thread on r/gaming leaks and rumors by a user who was collecting various statements about the game and the development behind the scenes. And curiously enough, this rumor, I'm going to preface this by saying, yeah, none of this is like super confirmed, but there is enough commonalities between a couple people's accounts that I think it's something to at least keep in mind. And also some pretty lengthy comments left by people. It just feels like a lot of effort. If they're fake, there's a lot of effort put into a fake thing for something I don't know. And people who are, you can back up certain things that they say. So, the development of Multiversus was problematic due to player-first games mismanagement. That is the title of the post. So, there are a couple of different people who are behind the scenes working on the game, or know people who were involved, who consistently cited chaotic and bad leadership. That is the word chaos comes up a lot when you read these things, and kind of lines up. Kind of felt like they were making a lot of changes very slapdash in response to community feedback. A consistent point of criticism has been with the founder, Tony Huynh. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce his last name. I'm a white American. Let's call him Tony. That he had the idea. He essentially, what I'm getting from this is that the story essentially goes, Tony had the idea to make a crossover platform fighter or some kind of crossover title with Warner Brothers characters leveraging the absurd amount of stuff that their corporate conglomerate owns. He founds Player First Games himself, and their first game is Multiversus. There were multiple different semi-anonymous sources who described Tony as being Elon Musk-like, which, hey, we were just talking about that guy. Now, I don't know if Tony was hitting the Sig Heils in the office. I don't know if he was hitting the Sigs. I don't know if he was talking. I don't know if he was attending far-right German political party rallies and talking about how they need to preserve the white race. I don't know if he was doing that. But at the very least, it was he needs to be surrounded by... He has a big ego and he needs to be surrounded by yes men. That's the point of... Seems to be the point of comparison. Supposedly, the QA testing, so apparently the game had like a ton of bugs. That's what I'm finding out from the community. The game had a ton of bugs on top of just huge balance issues. Look, balance issues I get. Supposedly the QA process was essentially like a little clique of QA people who were all friends with Tony, and then all of them, including Tony, would just sit down and play the game casually, and that was what they called testing. Apparently they were if the developers brought up concerns to the QA department, they were sort of chastised for doing so. Again, like the clickiness of it. Again, don't mess with Tony or his friends. There is a long post from a fairly long post. It was a comment that was on the Multiversus subreddit that is included in this big collection mega post. Now, this person is actually in the comments of this mega post, and if you look at they seem to be who they say they are via their history and the way that they talk about it. They are named something with an X. The original comment was deleted, but they are like in the comments of this one, Xesaie, Zesaie or something. He seems to speak with a lot of authority, and I don't know. Again, take everything with a grain of salt, but they write, I was the meta systems designer. Full disclosure, I left because of the dev chaos and some problems with leadership. I will not present my case. It's needless drama. So what they mean by meta systems designer is not like in-game fighting stuff. They're talking about economy, microtransactions, basically everything outside of the game. What are the progression systems? Stuff like that. They were the meta systems designers, what they're claiming. I wasn't at the company when the decision to do free-to-play was made. I came in to fix the economy, basically, but the story is the same. Free-to-play is a high-risk, high-reward model. If it works, you make way more money than a premium model, but the chance of succeeding is much lower because you have to get conversions. Okay? This is doubly bad in a fighting game because you can't sell power. This is when I want to preface that this person seems like kind of a weird scumbag who is just like in the business of finding out how to exploit people. So I don't really like this person's vibes, but this is like a window into what the thought process is. Like in a mobile free-to-play game, I can sell you gacha and people accept it. That won't work in a fighting game. The players would rightly rebel, and the competitive scene, which is required for success, if only as a marketing angle, would collapse. So the goal is to sell cosmetics, but most people won't bother, so you have to figure out how to sell something else. And the solution you basically always end up on is selling time. I can tell you, I know players will pay for early access. And just as much that the people unwilling to do so will hate it. The thing is, in well over a decade in the industry, I've learned the people that complain on social media don't really impact the people that spend. And we need that spend. And this was a crazy detail, if true. They mentioned 40 plus staff, server fees, a lot of licensing fees. Apparently, I don't know if this was ever confirmed, but they just kind of dropped that at some point Goku was in talks. I think Warner Brothers owns the distribution to Dragon Ball in some capacity. Goku was not included because the IP holder charges a flat $20 million. Woof. Okay. Okay. Back to selling time. The logic of early release is easy. All players can get the character for free. So this is something that Multiversus did. Like when they relaunched, you could get Agent Smith. Like, so they gave you Jason for free. But in order to get Agent Smith, you had to do this horrible, unfun, like fucking branching mode that was like the most, it was so lame. I thought it was so lame. They were called Rifts, I think. And if you just grinded the absolute fuck out of it, you could get one character. I was like, I'm not doing this shit. That was when I was like, okay, this feels like either they're desperate or they don't respect me. So all players can get the character for free, but we tax the impatient. They're more impatient than you think. So that's the way that this person describes this. We tax the impatient. Everyone else can wait or pay. That was the plan I proposed. 3 phases. Premium only for a fixed amount of time. This is the tax the impatient part. Increased SC cost, which is the character currency, for a fixed amount of time. This drains the hoarders slightly and puts soft pressure to spend established, I'm not sure exactly like what all this terminology is. I'll just read it exactly as they write it. To spend established character, reduced SC cost. So it seems like, so the idea is, yeah, you have premium only for a fixed amount of time. Then you have a pricey, you release them for like the earnable currency for a higher price than older characters, which in his words drains the hoarders slightly. We're not going to monetize on these players much at this point anyways, so make them more available. Oh yeah, then reduce the cost to get all the rest of the people who weren't going to spend that much anyways. This is a system of soft incentives to spend. Oh my God. We need to add pain points. We have to keep the game active. The trick is to do it in a way that the free players still have a way to progress. The phrase "we need to add pain points" boggles my mind. I hate these people. Because free players are content for the paying players. Now, this might seem like a dark comment, but it's true. You can't sustain a free-to-play game with only the players. You need, maybe they mean free players. You need the free players, or paying players? Maybe they meant payers. I'm not sure. You need the free players and need them to have some sense of fun, so the paying players feel the value of their spend. So there's selfish value in keeping free players involved, but we have to have pain points. Ugh. So there's a lot of stuff. One is just, especially at the end, what a disgusting mindset. Oh my God. I hate this. And the very matter-of-fact way really strikes me as someone who's been in this for so long that they don't even feel weird about it. Oh my, we have to add pain points. Ugh. I'm gonna be thinking about that for a while. Yeah. So that was the angle for monetization that this person who was brought in came up with. Which, oh geez, my neck. So they made the decision to go free to play. And then they said, then afterwards they brought in somebody to work on it. And he came up with this 3-phase system of starting off putting pressure on whales and then slowly easing up on it to allow for other, the lower spenders, the people who weren't going to spend anyway. And specifically what I find fascinating is the idea that you need to have free players who are not going to have access to certain content, specifically to create social, or to create like a feeling of reward for the paying players. I don't know, man. This is, oh man. And as from what I could tell, the game just felt monetized out the ass. It felt like when they said tax the impatient, holy shit. It felt like a tax on the patient. And I was like, okay, how long would it actually take for me to unlock this Agent Smith character? Holy fuck. There's a great YouTube video from a YouTuber named Whydo, WHYDO, going over the absurd amount of time you would need to invest to unlock a character for free. Oh my god, the handling of the economy was so fucked. There's another post on here, another post on here from someone who I don't think is really involved with the developer, but they at least have seem to have some kind of insight. It's titled From an Industry Vet. And they essentially say that you can blame Warner Brothers, but that's not really how that works. For all but the last 4 months, Player First Games was a second-party independent developer. So essentially, even after they got bought out wholly by WB, which I kind of remember that headline, the game was basically handled entirely by Player First. I imagine there was legal stuff that Warner Brothers helped with, getting deals and obviously funding the game. But in terms of the actual decision making, as to how the content was handled, how that stuff was implemented, who they brought in, all that stuff, maybe even the decision to shut the game down, all Player First. And specifically, it seems like Tony. If WB has fault, it's on backing a game with a mercurial would-be genius that wasn't remotely ready or qualified to run a studio. The creative studio had problem. This is actually a huge hidden issue in the games industry. So many startups are started by industry veterans who are at best lead level, but often individual contributors who have a brilliant idea they can sell to investors. So they recruit their friends as the leadership team, get some funding, and start a company. But they don't actually know much outside of their specialty. And corporate leadership is a specific profession and skill on its own. So you have managers that can't manage at that scale, and gameplay designers that are absolutely certain they know everything there is to know about live ops and can push their views. MVS isn't remotely unique in this regards. Yeah. It's I'll link to this post in the description, but I feel like, assuming that this stuff is true, especially the claims with behind the scenes, the monetization, it was a combination of, number one, the gameplay I think the concept was a little wonky. The actual handling of the project by the leads, namely Tony, is who keeps coming up. Not really understanding how to implement a healthy live service free-to-play model. Just becoming way too, let's say, pain points. If you went a little overboard on the pain points, the decision to, with the leadership, the decision to go under, spend time and resources remaking the game, it just reeks of so much wasted effort. It's just so much wasted effort. Multiversus will be going down after the end of their 5th season, and I don't know if anything. The future looks bleak for Player First. Hopefully, the people who are able to put some good work in on the game will have something for their resume. I feel bad for the people who really connected to this game. I feel bad for the people who ran tournaments. I feel very bad for that guy who got a Multiversus logo tattooed on his arm, like his forearm, gigantic. It was huge. I feel so bad for that guy. I went to someone was reposting the Twitter thread where he initially posted it, and this is in October, and someone replies, "This guy's gonna kill himself when the game goes down, when the game's not around by next year." Holy shit. You could call it prophetic, but it's more just observant. And I went to that guy's Twitter. I went to his posts, and I found the date that the announcement went out, and then I just looked starting from there, and literally the first thing is, I feel like killing myself. I feel really bad for people like that. I really do. Godspeed. I hope that they can find. Unfortunately, the servers, they're not releasing, they're delisting the game, which feels like a bit of a spit in the eye. Hopefully there's some kind of cracked pirated version that's still going to be accessible that people can run. It will be functional, with its offline modes. You could probably crack it and then run it through Parsec if you really wanted to. I hope something good can come out of it. That's my closing thoughts on Multiversus. Now I'm going to talk about some stuff that I played. Jeez, remember when I said I had 5 things to talk about and we're already at an hour 40? So, 2 games that I played. The first is, I'm going to come off as a bit of a poser, I will admit. But I have just, for the first time, played Papers, Please. Papers, Please, the 2013, I want to say? Indie game by Lucas Pope, which I feel like it's one of those things I don't really have to talk about. And I'm so late to the party, I feel as if I have nothing yet to add to the conversation. I think everything that you could probably say about Papers, Please has already been said. But I can at least kind of talk about my own just experience with the game, and if you haven't played it, to recommend it. Because yes, it is great. I really enjoy it. It's really cool and unique, and it totally hits what it's trying to do. For anyone who isn't aware, Papers, Please is an indie game from 2013 that puts you in the role of an immigration inspector on the border of a fictional, let's say southeastern European country. Takes place in the 80s in what is pretty clearly a sort of a fictionalized version of the either the USSR, or really, to me, it's more like all the satellite states that were just like the Yugoslavias, all those countries that don't exist anymore, when they were in these periods of great flux. It feels like you are experiencing the death throes of a regime, and all of these countries that are creating and forming seemingly by the day. Great times of great political unrest and instability. And naturally, what that creates is a lot of immigration. So people are trying to go to the fictional country of Arstotzka, which you are a member of. And the game is you sit in your little booth, and then you call people in from the outside. They present their papers to you. Yes, papers, please. And then they all drop them down on your desk. And then it is up to you to determine whether or not they are cleared for entry into the country. You stamp them with an approve or deny, and then send them off. So initially, I think one of the things that people like to talk about is it's a game that adds an incredible amount of intrigue to a desk job, which is true. I think most people would not consider the idea of just sitting and looking at someone's passport and immigration documents very interesting, and just trying to match them to records and make sure that they're not expired and all that. But man, what you're really playing is a test of your ability to pay attention. The core skill that's being tested is how many rules can you keep track of? There is a time limit. You can only get so many people. You can only get so many people in throughout the day, and you will get a bonus based off of how many people you manage to get through in the line. I don't know if approvals or denials are. I don't know if it's just for approvals, but based on how many people you get, you will get more money, which is important because at the end of the day, you go home and you have to face the fact of paying your bills. So you've got you've got a family to take care of. You've got like a wife, son, a mother-in-law, and an uncle, I believe. And you have to pay for rent, food, heating. If they get sick, you have to pay for medicine. And these costs can add up, and naturally there is sort of a negative downward spiral in the form of, well, if you can't pay for heat, they're going to get cold. And if they get cold, they're going to get sick. And now they need medicine, and now they're hungry, and stuff starts compounding on itself day after day. So that's when so the immediate like pressure on you is, can you get through as many people as possible as efficiently as possible? And that means having to manually check a lot of stuff. Getting better at the game is very rewarding because eventually you just learn. So one thing that just kept tripping me up is passports with invalid issuing cities. There is a list of cities. So you have in your rule book that you can consult at any time. They go through each country and which cities from that country are able to issue passports. And one thing that kept tripping me up was it's the wrong city. Eventually, as you go on, you just get familiar with the names of all of these places to the point where the only time you have to check is if a name really sticks out to you or it's one you haven't seen in a while. There's it's kind of puzzle like. I don't know. I think a lot of just interesting challenges in video games kind of stoke the same fires in the brain that puzzles do. They just do them at different speeds. So there's something in your brain that I think it starts activating when you play Papers, Please. And suddenly, because obviously they start stacking and stacking and stacking all these different documents you now have to check because of events that are going on. It's not just a passport. Now they need a clearance paper. Now they need there's a polio outbreak, so they need a vaccination record. There's all this stuff that keeps getting added on. And getting 4 or 5 different papers thrown at you with all of this information that you have to double check behind the little interview that you give them, and then having to figure out a way to intake all this information, double check it, and get through it as quickly as possible with the proper approval or denial. Because if you get it wrong, you will get a warning, and after like 3 warnings, 2 or 3 warnings, you start getting deducted from your pay. The part of the brain that has to start activating when you're doing that, I feel like it's the same part that has to work overtime when you're in a really complex fight in like Doom Eternal or something, where there's a sense of urgency and you have to put a lot of stuff together and you have to process a lot of information very quickly and make decisions based on it. And certain stuff you can brush off, certain stuff you can ignore, but you're always making a risk. You're always taking a risk by not double checking. You're always taking a risk by not making completely sure that is the right issuing city, or, oh, I missed, it was past the expiry date. Or, the one that kept fucking me up was the height. Eventually, they start factoring in height, and you have to start referencing how tall the person is based off of the wall in the background. And sometimes it's not easy to tell. Sometimes there's a discrepancy that you can point out. There's an inspection mode, and you point out, you basically click on a part of you click on 2 items, something on one of their documents, maybe, and then, something else in your rule book, and it'll connect them and say discrepancy detected between these 2 things, or between a date and the clock that you've got, or their picture, and then you click on the actual person standing in front of you, and then you can interview them. And sometimes it's not anything suspicious. They're just like, oh, sorry, here's my passport, or here's this document, I forgot about that. And everything checks out, but you have to check. You have to be very rigorous. And that's before, this is like all on a very mechanical level. That's before you even get to the plot or the themes. Naturally, you are living in an authoritarian regime that is in a kind of state of decay. It's in a state of trying to hold on to its power. And you, as a government official, it's a very interesting position to be put in. Oftentimes, you are the main characters in stories like these are lower class. They're in the scum of society, or they're kind of like heroic rebels of some sort. You're a government worker, and the pressure is put on you to enforce the government laws. And that creates natural ethical dilemmas. So very quickly, the game introduces to you an ethical dilemma. A woman comes up to you, and she says, she has all the correct paperwork, but she says, I'm being trafficked into the country as a prostitute. There's a man coming up who, this is his name in his description. I need you to deny him entry. And you're like, oh, okay. So you let her through. And then a couple people later, that guy comes up. And it's him. And he's got all the proper paperwork. And so now you have to decide. And this is very early in the game when your funds are tight. You don't have opportunities that you'll get later to make a little bit of cash on the side. Money's very tight. And you've only got so many citations that you can get before, it starts getting tighter. And again, especially if this is your first time playing, you've probably fucked up a couple times. It just happens. And it's the guy. And you have to decide, how risky do I want to play it? Is it worth potentially getting written up? I don't know what the consequences are going to be. And you can deny him entry into the country. Here's another one. You get a newspaper at the start of the day, and it will fairly often affect the news of the day. Will have something to do with a new mechanic or something that's going to happen that you're going to run into. There is a child murderer who is fleeing back to Arstotzka, and a guy comes up to you in the line, and he says, "Hey, this guy is coming up. I think he's in line. I need you to let him through because he killed my daughter, and I'm going to get revenge. I'm going to kill him myself." Now, at this point in the game, they've introduced to you that it's up to you. It's your responsibility to identify wanted criminals, and you have to keep the newspaper on your desk to reference everyone who comes up in case they might be a criminal. Some days there's no criminals, but you do have to keep it on your desk. So the guy comes up, and if you don't recognize him, point at the discrepancy with your inspect mode, and then detain him, you will get docked. You will get a citation for it. And it's another thing that's like, are you going to make that decision or are you not? There's like a secretive counter-government group that starts communicating with you that has the potential to get you in some hot water. That means dead with your government. It's what's interesting about Papers, Please is that it is a very disempowering game. You really feel like you're a cog in the machine, and the little ways in which you are able to take some control back ultimately don't mean that much. Like it's well, sometimes they do, but it's always on a personal level. There is oftentimes no mechanical incentive, and actually mechanical disincentives, for you to quote unquote do the right thing, or for you to make certain decisions that you might see as more ethical. Like, people will say, so okay, there's a guard who works at the security stop, and he says his girlfriend, who he met in the war, is immigrating, so they're immigrating to Arstotzka, so they're going to be together forever, and he needs you to let her through. So she comes through. She does not have the right paperwork. You should, by the rules, deny her, but maybe you let her through. And she says, "I'll never forget this. Thank you so much." Actually, wait, hang on. You do get some money from that. You do get a reward for that. You do get a reward for that. But there are other instances where someone gets let in, you bend the rules for someone, and like nothing mechanically comes of it. You don't get a tip, you don't get any bonuses. They just thank you. And you just have to feel like you did something good. It's kind of morally, ethically, it's interesting to put someone in these situations because mechanically, for the most part, the game really like pushes you. Like, the structures of the game push you into being a cog in the machine, towards always playing by the rules, always denying and approving the right people, who just all based on their paperwork. Occasionally, you will get pressure from like a kind of corrupt higher up who'll be like, "Let this person in or else." You're like, okay, I guess I got to do that. But for the most part, it's kind of just how it's a very social game in the positions that it puts you into, and how it feels really good to be doing government paperwork and immigration stuff. And when you deny someone entry to a country they're trying to immigrate into, you're like, yeah, I totally got that one. That didn't get by me at all. And I don't know. Some people described it as an empathy game. I hate that term. I hate that phrase. That feels like an admission that video games are not a real legitimate art form. That you have to use the phrase empathy game. I believe Lucas Pope himself described it as an other people simulator. And I think that's very accurate. I think that's more accurate. Because Papers, Please puts you into a position that no one ever really imagines themselves in. You aren't like you aren't even doing exciting government work. You aren't like a secret agent or something like that. You're not a leader of any kind. You are just like a bog standard immigration inspector. You're the biggest thing you do, the most pivotal thing you do is you stamp a passport. And it's a position that no one ever really thinks about being in, or maybe even the ones that they've interacted with. Especially not in the context of having like an oppressive government like Arstotzka is pretty clearly meant to be. There's something like 20 endings in the game. I've gotten like 4 of them so far. And man, it is a very engrossing game, but I cannot play it when I'm kind of tired because you need to be awake and alert to play this game. I was playing it last night when I was a little groggy, and I was just getting excited over and over again. I was getting messed up. Yeah. So if you have not played Papers, Please, I would highly recommend it. Maybe you won't enjoy it. Maybe you'll find it a little monotonous and boring, but it's a really special experience. Makes me want to go play the guy's other stuff. He put out Obra Dinn, The Return of the Obra Dinn, as well as actually he put out a game like a year before Papers, Please that was set in the same sort of little mini fictionalized Soviet region. But you were running the newspaper for a different country called Kolechia. That one seems pretty interesting. Apparently it was made for a game jam. So I think it was called like the Kolechia Tribune or something. Kolechia Daily News, something like that. Similar kind of like ethical balancing act of running news stories versus propagandizing for the government. Yeah, Papers, Please. Check it out. Finally, maybe I shouldn't have waited all this time to talk about this big topic because my throat feels tired. But I played Alan Wake, another game I was meaning to get around to for a while. I got this and Alan Wake's American Nightmare on sale for pretty cheap. I figured, why not? And you know what? Okay, this is a game that I've heard about. It's had, I think, a bit of a limited reach just because it was an Xbox 360 exclusive for quite a while. But I believe back in 2020, it went to Steam. And then there was Control, there was Alan Wake 2. So it's kind of come back into the public consciousness a little bit. And I wanted to, hey, you know, it's probably pretty short. So let's check it out. I really like Alan Wake. Alan Wake is a very cool game. I think it has a couple shortcomings, but for the most part, I really enjoyed my time with it. Alan Wake is about an author, Alan Wake, who visits he's vacationing with his wife in this little seaside harbor town in Washington State. He's like this horror mystery thriller author, and he's had writer's block for the past 2 years since the completion of his last book. And he is the sort of purpose of the trip is to clear his mind, get him back on track, get his mind off of work. So they go to a cabin that they've rented, which is out on this lake. It's in the middle. It's on this island in the middle of a lake that you got to take a bridge out to. And everything's cool. But the first night, his wife, Alice, surprises him with a typewriter. And they get into a fight because he's like, I didn't want to deal with this shit. I was trying to de-stress and not think about writing. They get into an argument. And some weird shit happens. Alice falls into a lake. Lots of missing memories. Don't know what the fuck happened. There's a weird lady in funeral attire. Some old lady in funeral garb who is flickering in and out of existence. Suddenly, Alan wakes. That's the other thing. His initial is A-wake. He's awake. Alan awakes in his car, smashed into the side of hanging over a cliffside, smashed practically through the barricade. Stumbles out. He discovers it's been a week, and he just cannot recall what happened. So all of a sudden, he starts to be assaulted by these sort of shadowy zombies that he must defend himself by shining a light on them. Lots of light and shadow. That's like a core motif throughout the game. And just figuring out what the fuck happened in that time and what is going on. Because it seems like he starts picking up these pages of a manuscript. And the manuscript seems to predict stuff that's going to happen in the future. And these aren't just little non-diegetic collectibles. They are meant to be real, and he's picking them up and reading them. And the story just kind of goes from there. He's trying to get his wife back. He's trying to figure out what's going on. Conflict arises. So when I talk about the game, I think it's mostly about the story. The game is really mostly about the narrative, specifically the writing. It's a very mechanically lean game. There's not a whole lot going on. The gameplay primarily consists of running through the woods. The combat is essentially the shadowy zombies who have been overtaken by this dark presence. If you shine your flashlight on them for long enough, a little reticle will close all the way. The shadow will be blasted off of them, and then they will you can actually damage them. So with your guns. So there is a very light amount of resource management between your ammo, the batteries that you need to power your flashlight. The flashlight is itself, it does not run out of battery, but if you choose to kind of put it on the high beam setting, which will affect enemies faster, then it will drain. It will actually start draining. You can quick reload your battery with batteries. So it's this kind of game of there are prerequisites before you can actually attack the enemies. You have to wear down these shadowy defenses, which requires you to keep some distance, keep the light on them. So the enemies always have some amount of time where they are dangerous. Eventually, you are able to figure out there's a lot of situations where I was just able to bottleneck them into a position and then just dispatch them without care. But occasionally, the game does toss you into very stressful, difficult situations that are legitimately pretty tricky to get yourself out of. Just throwing many enemies into a large open field, or a larger area with a lot of blind spots for them to route you from. So that stuff does come up. I'd say that there is the primary purpose of combat in a horror game, in the way that it serves the overall game, is that it creates a sense of danger and a sense of an accountability for the player. That no, you can't just run from this stuff. You actually have to deal with it, and you need to confront the scary things. I think that as a horror game, it's pretty scary. There are some legitimately spooky, atmospheric moments. Not the combat isn't always that freaky, but there are points where I felt like, oh man, I don't know. Okay, one moment that made a big impression on me is really early in the game. It's like episode 1 or 2. It follows an episodic structure. You go into a cabin. You're just trying to go from point A to point B. And on the way, you can go into a little cabin on the side of the road. And inside there's some supplies. It's not really in use, but there's some supplies you can scavenge and a radio that you can turn on. There's a number of radio broadcasts that you can listen to throughout the game. And as I'm just sitting listening to this radio broadcast, it's still daytime in game outside. It's still daytime. And they only throw enemies at you at night. So I'm listening. So I feel like fairly safe. I'm just laying in this slightly eerie cabin. You know, it's an abandoned cabin. It's always got a kind of a mood to it. And as I'm just listening to this radio broadcast, waiting for it to be done, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye from the side of the screen. And I turn the camera to a window and I see just a split second of a shadowy figure walking past holding an axe. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And that freaked me out. That genuinely freaked me out because I was not expecting it. And I left the cabin fully expecting that the game had just spawned an enemy and that they were trying to get into the cabin and the pathing had just screwed up. And I go out and there's nothing. There's no enemy there. There's nothing to attack you. The game doesn't even start spawning enemies until you get to a much later point in the, you know, for a while. You are not in a combat. It doesn't expect combat from you. It's just this thing that happens, and I don't know if it was intentional. It feels intentional. That's right. Like there's kind of a balance to be had with scripted horror stuff in games, because sometimes to me, if it feels too scripted, it loses a bit of the fear. It loses a bit of effectiveness. Because I and this could just be that I play a lot of video games, but it's a situation where I see the seams, you know. I'm seeing the strings on the puppet, and I'm seeing how, okay, when I walk over that spot, that thing jumps out. Okay. I'm understanding how it works. But that moment, it felt so organic, and like I could have just missed it. If I had been looking away or closing my eyes to rest them or whatever, you know, if I had just been looking in a different direction and not caught that, maybe I just wouldn't have seen that little moment. And that was freaky to me. It was freaky because it felt like almost like there were no rules. There were no rules that I could follow. Or it broke the rules that I would get used to, you know? I feel like a lot of people, if you've played a lot of games or horror games especially, sometimes you enter, you know, you build up expectations for the game. In Quake 4, this is a weird example. In Quake 4, you get very used to anticipating when the enemies are going to pop out because that game is practically a rail shooter. I remember reading watching a video where someone mentioned, it was called like Spaces Designed for Violence. It was actually a whole thing about schools that were built in such a way to anticipate school shootings and the psychological effect that has on children to be in an environment built like that. But in the intro to the video, he uses the example of video games and namely Gears of War, where Gears of War, it's a cover shooter, every combat location needs to have some cover. So eventually, without even really realizing it, he just got used to walking into an area, and even if there was seemingly nothing going on, if he saw a bunch of waist-high walls, he was like, he started to subconsciously expect a combat encounter to break out. So it was rarely a surprise after a certain point. And again, when you break that rule, I don't know. You tap into something. That's the one example that I can think of in the game that really got me, but it was so memorable. It reminds me of, I want to say it was Yoko Taro who said this, but don't exactly quote me on this. But I believe it was a Japanese designer who said that giving the player a sense of freedom is not about presenting them with 100 options. You could give the player an immense sense of freedom by having 5 options, but only presenting 2 or 3, or even 1. Because when the player feels like they understand the rules and they understand what's possible, suddenly, when they accidentally, because I'm sure many devs will set up situations to kind of teach this to players, when they accidentally discover method 4, or something like that, at that moment they're like, whoa, what? Hang on, I can do what? And that feeling is so much more powerful. The feeling of discovering something is so much more powerful, makes so much more of an impression in your mind that you don't have to have infinite possibilities. You can just supply the player with enough and then let them explore it, and the feeling of exploration is more rewarding to them. Not a one-to-one example of what I'm talking about, but I think that letting the player stumble across things organically creates these really memorable moments. The improvised stuff. The improvised and the quote-unquote improvised. Because again, maybe that was scripted. I don't know. But it was cool. I really like the characters in the game. I think, okay, so I'm talking about presentation. That's most of what I have to say for the gameplay. It does a good job. It does what it needs to. And it never really felt like it dragged. There was like 1 or 2 spots that I was like, ugh, this sucks. When they start when the darkness starts throwing objects at you and it starts getting physics-based, was when it was, there's like 1 or 2 spots that are like, this is fucking annoying, that I had to redo like 5 or 6 times. For the most part, the gameplay is serviceable to pretty fun, depending on how much you like it. It's not incredibly deep, but also the game is like 10 hours, so I think it took me 12 hours total. It's not very long. Presentation-wise, I think Alan Wake is a really interesting case study in being of its time. I think in some ways it's aged very well, and in other ways it has not aged very well. I guess in one funny way that it's aged, this is a 7th gen game, so it's got collectibles! It's got collectibles, baby! And one of those makes sense. The manuscript, the pages of the manuscript, that makes sense, That is actually worked into the story as an important thing. But they're also just like, yeah, there's like 100 coffee thermoses strewn about the town of Bright Falls. Just randomly in the woods, too. Just, I guess someone was drinking coffee and just left it here. I don't know what that was all about, but yeah. So, I think the ways in which the game has aged very well are, it's got a really good story. The writing is very tight. I fucked up my sleep schedule a little bit just so that I could stay up to finish the game because I was so interested in what was going to happen. Especially once you get through like the first episode or two and you start really getting into, I don't know, like every episode feels like it's paced very well. They frequently have these great set piece moments. Oh my God, the one in episode 4 with the stage. If you played the game, you know what I'm talking about. That one rules. That one kicks so much ass. And just, I don't know, just interesting plot developments continue to happen, especially like in the latter half. Like episodes 3 to the end. 3 through 6. The characters I find really likable. Alan Wake he's kind of an everyman, you know? He's obviously, this is very Stephen King inspired as he feels like a Stephen King character. He is a writer. His name is, he's like kind of a self-insert. He's a bit of a self-insert for Sam Lake, the lead writer, creative guy at Remedy. Sam Lake can get away with having self-inserts because Remedy's games are generally very good. So they can get away with it. Alan's, he's a cool character. He has, you kind of have to, you have to get a bit of a handle on him. He's got a bit of a negative, kind of darker side. People keep talking about his temper, but at the same time, he's not the most stable guy. He's not the most stable guy, and that kind of manifests itself positively and negatively. So people keep talking about his temper. Apparently he like punched a paparazzi, which honestly, not going to really put that past him. I'm not gonna hold that against him. I mean, but also like yeah, he gets in fights with his wife. As far as I know, they never mention anything about getting physical. But he's there's like a moment in the manuscript where a character notes that Alan is like almost scarily in love with his wife. Like, he's an intense guy. He has an intense emotional side to him. And I think that part of it's almost like part of the theme of the game, or it is that these things that he writes in the manuscript start coming to life. These events he writes about start happening. And it's almost like he can't, part of the author, you know, the author puts a part of themselves into their creation, but the creation then almost feeds back. It feeds back into the real world. I don't know. It's cool. He's a cool horror protagonist as a writer. He's also I went and watched a bunch of interviews with Sam Lake. One of his goals was to differentiate Alan from Max Payne. And one of the ways they did that was to make Alan feel very unprepared for the situation. I mean, there's no crosshair in the game. There is kind of like, it's like, okay, yeah, he's able to handle firearms, which is like, I don't know how many people would be able to just pick up a gun and know how to use it or reload it or anything. So a little bit of fantasy, but you do feel a sense of unpreparedness. Every time you start off in a sprint, he has this weird uncoordinated takeoff animation where he almost like flails, trying to, almost panicked, taking off. He runs out of breath after like 5 seconds, which is another like component of the combat. Is it's kind of hard to run away from enemies. Spooky. He feels like he's unprepared for the situation, and he's just trying to figure out. He's just freestyling his way through this whole thing. His editor Barry comes into the story, and at first I thought Barry. I didn't realize he was going to be such a major character, and I kind of expected him that he's like a slime ball. He's kind of like a slimy, agent, and he's trying to, oh, Al, you doing your? He's always putting pressure on Alan to work. He and Alice don't really get along, and I don't know. He's just, that's kind of where I thought it was going. By the end of the game, I was like, dude, if anything happens to Barry, I'm gonna be so pissed off. If they hurt my man Barry Wheeler, I'm gonna be pissed off. He's just like I don't know. He's just a funny guy. He's like a jovial, he's got a big personality, right? He's a big guy with a big personality. And he's not really like a creep. They make a point that he's not creepy. He gets the hots for women, but he doesn't do anything like over the line. He's just kind of like a, hey, what the kind of guy. Al, what the fuck is going on over here? What is this crazy? I love Barry so much. There's like this description in one of the manuscripts of a moment that you never get to see, but it's Barry when he gets separated from Alan, and he's in a store with a bunch of camping equipment and like lanterns and flashlights and stuff. And the description of him smiling because he's finally gonna get to feel like an action hero suiting up is so awesome. He's like, yeah, I love Barry so much. In all of those ways, right? Like, they really nailed it with the narrative. The writing is good. The dialogue is good. The progression of the plot and the pacing, I think for the most part, is really spot on. The performances are all great. Pretty much every voice actor does a really good job in this game. The vocal direction is totally on point for practically everyone. The one place this game is let down is visually. This game visually has not aged very well. I don't know how it looked at the time, but you really feel that this is before the big leaps in facial capture, especially. Excuse me, facial capture and motion capture. Every character has this very stiff expression the whole time. It's really the eyes. You know, like the eyes? That's a big thing. I felt that when I was going through Arkham. Specifically Arkham Asylum. Where that game's, I was like, this game looks really nice. It's got a great art direction. The textures are obviously kind of early HD era, but it doesn't matter because the way everything, the art direction is so good that everything totally comes together. And then you talk to an NPC and it cuts to a flat as a board medium shot of Batman. And it looks 10 times worse. The game's visuals just fall off a cliff. It's crazy. Alan Wake never gets quite that bad. It's just sort of a consistent kind of, these characters are they're in these intense, extreme situations. The performances are really involved and emotional. And their eyes just cannot move. Their brows don't move at all. They're all just stiff. Like I already used like a board. Stiff as a corpse. The motion capture feels, how motion capture often has a kind of, I don't know, how would I describe it? Motion capture often has a bit of clunk to it. Even really high quality stuff. Maybe not for movies, but in games especially, you'll get there's kind of a, I don't know how I'd say it, either a lightness to the way that characters move. It could be a lack of certain articulation. It could be the way that clothes don't fold properly as, you know, as they move around. Something about it, there's just kind of a, I don't know. I don't know what the term is for it. But it's like there's a bit of a clunk, a bit of a inaccuracy in the motion capture. Even in really good stuff, I find, in games. For movies, maybe not quite as much. But for games, I feel it. and oftentimes that's where animators will come in, right? You see this a lot with fighting games. Animators will come in and use the work based off of the motion capture data and kind of augment it where they need to make it, to animate it, you know, to make it really feel animated, and because, you know, the rules of animation are there because a one-to-one recreation of life is not actually the most lifelike feeling. It's not actually the most lively feeling. So the just, yeah, like the way the characters look and the way they move always feels like it's in a bit of a tonal clash with what's happening. Alan specifically has this weird kind of dumb look on his face all the time. Just the way that his eyes are, he's modeled with a very short upper lip. And his like teeth are always showing. His top row of teeth are like always showing. And I always find it very distracting in every scene. And it does kind of take me out of it a little bit. Like it does feel a little bit weird and a little bit janky looking. And it's the one way I would say the game is really brought down. The one way. Because the narrative is so strong. And it stands to contrast the strength of the narrative. If it was just like a whatever story, then maybe it wouldn't be as big of a deal. But I noticed it a lot more. I don't know. Just, is there anything else that I'm not thinking of? I'm very hungry, so my brain isn't working quite as well. Oh, right. This might be the last thing, but, Alan Wake comes from a very interesting time, which I feel like was actually most of video games, that has ended recently. And I'm not sure when exactly it ended, and I would love to kind of trace it back a bit. It's a time of product placement. Now, I mentioned, you know, Alan Wake's flashlight. Literally, I feel like it's one of the most iconic parts of the game, one of the most iconic visuals. It's almost inseparable from him as a character. I mentioned I was playing Alan Wake to someone the other day, and they said, "Oh, the guy with the flashlight." Like that's who he is to many people who didn't even play the game. That person hadn't even played the game. And this flashlight, your primary tool, your weapon, the one weapon you have to fight back against the forces of darkness that are threatening to overtake the world. It runs on 100% Energizer batteries, baby. Energizer batteries, let's go. It is so funny to be walking around this game and just picking up Energizer brand battery packs. Like the exact packs you could pick up in a store. Maybe they've changed their branding since, but the exact same look just really threw me off at first. I forgot about the product placement in this game. Also, his phone, Verizon Wireless, because even in the Nightmare Shadow world, Verizon's got you covered. Just hilarious. It doesn't really take away from the game, not for me at least. Maybe for some people it would be distracting. It's just really funny. It's just a really funny... I don't know when... I feel like product placement has almost just gone the way of the dodo. I'm trying to think of other recent examples. And all I can think of is like the Red Bull logo costumes in Street Fighter V, which were literally just... Wait, was that Red Bull or was that just like the Capcom Pro Tour? They would just like stick the logo onto the characters' designs. It looked stupid. It looked terrible. What other product placement? Oh, I mean, I guess Final Fantasy 15 with the ramen. Oh no, I'm thinking about ramen now. Oh, I'm hungry. It felt like at one point in time, Yakuza's probably got something. It felt like at one point in time, product placement was so common, even outside of things where, you know, like sports games you kind of expect. Like, people kind of give it the pass in sports games because, you know, you watch NASCAR, they're literally covered in sponsorships, right? Football clubs, they've got sponsorships all over. Arenas and stadiums have sponsorships all over. It's kind of just part of what people expect now. So people sort of give it the pass. But I mean, there was, Jesus. I'm trying to think of other, hang on. Again, brain's not working that great. Product placement in games. Yeah, let's look up, is there anything funny? Product placement in video games. Oh shit, what am I talking about? The Norman Reedus Monster Energy. I guess that's a recent one. Kit Kats were in Theme Hospital. Fuck, I want Kit Kats now. Fuck. Oh yeah, Enter the Matrix has Powerade machines. Mercedes-Benz in Mario Kart 8. Cup noodles in Final Fantasy 15. I'm trying to look like recent stuff. Yeah, the Monster Energy thing. What the fuck is Judge Dredd versus Death? 2005? Yeah. Am I crazy, or was product placement more common back then? Like in the 2000s, right? Am I crazy? I want to make a video on this. This seems like a fun video idea. But yeah, it feels uncommon enough that it threw me for a loop when I first saw it, and then remembered, oh yeah, this game had product placement in it. Like literally the last episode of the game is like, it's like the climax, and it feels, there's so much momentum. I was so hyped for it. It starts with you getting into a car to drive to the final destination. And it's like you've come all this way, and now you're in a car and you feel really empowered now because you just get to cross so much distance. And it feels really good. And it starts with what else? 2 back-to-back billboards for Energizer and Verizon, baby. It's so fun. It's like in the parking lot. I think you're facing the Verizon ad. It's hilarious. Yeah. On the topic of that, the game, I would say, okay, the one weakness of the game, the ending is a little weak. It does end on, it's like a cliffhanger. It's pretty much a cliffhanger. It's like a stinger for a sequel. Which American Nightmare kind of is, from what I understand. I read like a quick synopsis, of just the premise after I finished the first game. Yeah, it also doesn't feel the most developed. I like the sections of you just like driving and driving and driving, but it felt like they got to episode 6 and they were like, okay, well, how do we, there's only like 2 things that happen. Really one section that happens. How do we turn that into something? How do we turn that into a whole episode, into like an hour and a half to 2 hours? And the way that they do it is fine. It feels a little bit padded, which unfortunately leads up to an ending which isn't entirely satisfying. The ending feels a little bit rushed. I really wanted to see what happened to more of the characters. afterwards, like my man Barry. I'm assuming everyone was fine, but yeah, left me a little bit dissatisfied. Although, like, the end section is cool, if, again, a little short, and I think that they could have done... I don't want to spoil it because I am recommending it. I think they could have done a little bit more with the concept at the tail end of the game. You'll see. It's the stuff they do with words. It's really neat. But not a whole lot is done with it that's very meaningful, which is unfortunate. So, slightly undercooked ending. But really good game overall. Oh, I should mention, this game has a very interesting development history. It started off as like an open world game because they were really trying to differentiate it from Max Payne. And then eventually they were just spinning their wheels for so long and didn't have a coherent vision that they just came in, they tore it down, and they were like, okay, they didn't restart from scratch. But they restructured the game from scratch, and they essentially took as to be as economical as possible, take as much stuff that they could that they had already finished, and try to work it into the new idea for the game, which was a much more linear experience. And I think it really benefits. It benefits and it hurt, and it in some ways you can really tell in a good way sometimes. For one, is that all of the locations take place in literally the same map. They had built this whole open world and this rendering technology to actually draw all that stuff in the distance. And you'll be walking around in the woods and you'll get to a certain vantage point and you will see off in the distance, hey, that's the gas station from episode 1. Cool. You don't go there. You're not going to go there, but you can see it. And it's like, oh, this is all part of the whole world. The world feels very cohesive, which is nice. It feels like everywhere you're going fits in some kind of a way. You never feel like you're just being dropped into like a separate dimension for an episode. But there are ways in which you can really tell, like just big areas of space that you can run around in that don't have a lot of stuff, that are just kind of there because they designed it. I feel like at least half of every gameplay section starts with, or it is preceded by a cutscene of Alan dropping into the woods or running into the woods. And then you can feel some designer saying, we made all of this, we need this whole map. You're going to fucking run through it. You spend so much time in the woods. Yeah, there's like one part where you go a little bit underground into a cave. And it's a big cave with all these different tunnels and routes. And you go down one, and the game literally, like, Alan keels over in a migraine, and the game forces you to turn around and is like, I can't go that way. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's part of the map that they never bothered to seal off, that was gonna go somewhere else when this was an open world game. That stuff they never finished. Yeah, you can feel it. But again, it creates for a cool feeling of the world, everything fitting together. You know, you'll be standing somewhere in one spot in one episode, and then a few episodes later, you'll be looking down and seeing the exact same place you were looking up from. And it's neat. It's neat. It lends a sense of atmosphere, and like Bright Falls is a real place. It's good. Yeah. Anything else to say about Alan Wake? Not really. I want to play the next one. I want to play American Nightmare because apparently it's pretty short. And maybe I'll play Control, and maybe I'll play Alan Wake 2 if they'd ever. I don't want to download the Epic Game Store. I don't want to download the Epic Game Store. I don't want to use it. I don't want to give Tim Sweeney the satisfaction. And with that, I'll end it. I'll end this podcast. If you've been listening as far, thank you for listening to me ramble. If you have a question, feel free to leave it down in the comments below, but please phrase it in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. The video has been delayed by like a week or so. I've had a hard time focusing, plus I got sick, so I lost like a little over a week's worth of time that I could have been working on stuff, so apologies if you've been anticipating that, but it's coming along. I'm chipping away at it. It is coming. Banana, cyberpunk music. Check out my Patreon, check out the main channel, check out all my stuff. I have a coffee. I'll hopefully be back next week a little more on time. Goodbye.